I first had the privilege of speaking to you after the budget 6 years ago, and warned then of the dangers of a boom fueled by reckless levels of lending and debt. And we're now dealing with the aftermath of that boom, the collapse of the banks, the recession, and the enormous government borrowing being used to keep the economy afloat. I could simply say, we told you so, but we're weeks from an election, and people want to know how we get out of the mess we're in. Your jobs, your businesses, and savings depend on it. Mr. Darling's budget was merely marking time. He said, and rightly, that the worst economic crisis since the 1920s has not had the extreme impact on families and jobs which many feared. But many of you have been hurt, and we're still in danger. And he failed to spell out what now needs to be done. The first big step is to sort out the government finances. The next government will have to cut the deficit or risk a serious financial crisis. But it needs to be done carefully to avoid creating a deep recession, more unemployment, and an even bigger deficit. The Liberal Democrats have spelt out what our spending priorities are, far more than the other major parties. And we realise that in government we'd need to do more. This is going to be painful and difficult, and I believe that politicians must come clean with you about the cuts required. But people know that the problem is too big and too long-term for any one party to deal with on its own. And that's why we've called on other parties to agree an economic framework to manage down the deficit and maintain confidence in Britain. We've proposed a cross-party council for financial stability, no matter who forms the next government. You should insist that politicians rise above petty tribal squabbling and work together to find solutions in the national interest. Sound finance is absolutely fundamental, and so is economic recovery to get the unemployed back to work. And they currently include alarming numbers of young people. And this can't happen until the banks function properly. They've lurched from irresponsible lending to starving good, small and medium-sized British companies of the capital they need to keep going and grow. The banks have been rescued by us, and they continue to enjoy a taxpayer guarantee, which they should pay for, in the form of a tax on their profits. And they must be made to act in the national interest, supporting recovery, not squandering their profits on big bonuses. The government has simply not been tough enough. Recovery means that we must invest to create an economy less dominated by financial gambling. It means more respect for people who make things. It means a revival of British industry, supporting investors and innovators and engineering. It means a new kind of economy which is environmentally sustainable. And we've got to give priority to the coming generation of young people who will inherit vast debt. We must make sure that despite the cuts that need to be made, money is set aside for improving schools and for employment programs. And we can't deal with these problems together as a united country when there are yawning inequalities of income and wealth. Yesterday you heard the Conservatives, and their top priority is to cut inheritance tax on double millionaires. Our priorities are rather different. Fairer taxes. We would ensure that nobody pays income tax on the first £10,000 of their income. Over 3.5 million low-paid workers and pensioners would pay no income tax, giving them a real incentive to work and save. And average earners would get a £700 tax cut. We would pay for this by reducing the tax loopholes enjoyed by the wealthy, like non-dom status, a tax on very valuable property worth over £2 million, and a tax on polluting aircraft. I want to see a united country with a greater sense of fairness, which is at peace with itself, in order to face the massive economic challenges which lie ahead.
That was a budget